Timor-Leste had been a Portuguese territory from the 1700s until 1975, when the Carnation Revolution in Lisbon led to the independence of many Portuguese colonies. In Timor-Leste, heated political debate about the territory's future culminated in a period of violent political instability in August of 1975. Then in December of that year, Indonesia's armed forces launched a full-scale assault on the capital Dili. For the next 24 years, Timor-Leste remained an unsolved international problem until on May 5, 1999, the United Nations managed to broker an agreement between Portugal and Indonesia, allowing a popular consultation to take place, offering the East Timorese the choice between autonomy within the Indonesian state or independence.
This is a historic moment. I am delighted to tell you that we have just signed the 3 agreements on East Timor, as you saw, between the Republic of Indonesia and the Republic of Portugal. We are now moving immediately on the next phase. The United Nations staff are already on their way to the region to begin preparing for the popular consultation. All of us are determined to ensure that it is free, fair and thorough.
We had a very precise mandate. We were authorized by the Security Council to hold what was called a popular consultation on a proposal that was being put to the East Timorese people by the government of Indonesia.
To carry out the popular consultation, the Security Council authorized the establishment of the United Nations mission in East Timor, UNAMET, on the 11th of June 1999. By July, UN electoral staff had begun to arrive, and a voter education campaign was initiated explaining the nature of the referendum.
Under the mandate, UNAMET is here to organize and conduct the popular consultation.
However, an already volatile political situation grew steadily worse as pro-integration militia, supported by elements of the Indonesian security forces, embarked on a devastating campaign of aggression and intimidation, and the UN found itself working within an ever-rising tide of violence.
These militia ran rampant through the town, burning houses, and no effort was made to stop them. The situation of law and order, as you know, is in the hands of the Indonesian police, who seem to be unable to respond in any adequate way to the deterioration.
The situation seemed on the verge of swinging dangerously out of control.
And there was great uncertainty as to whether the ballot really could go ahead and whether the international presence could help create the security conditions for a successful ballot. So we were in a constant struggle to confront the Indonesians with the responsibility that they'd insisted upon and decide whether it was right to go forward to the ballot, even when it was clear that the responsibility for security was not being fulfilled and were not the proper security conditions. And yet at the same time, if we had not gone forward, the Timorese would have lost the window of opportunity to exercise the right to self-determination, which had been denied to them for 24 years.
The poll was held on 30th of August, almost without incident, and the result was overwhelmingly in favour of independence, with 78% of voters choosing independence over the option of autonomy within Indonesia.
And that's when the retribution was wreaked on East Timor by the militia.
Following the announcement of the result, pro-integration militias, with the support of the Indonesian security forces, launched a systematic campaign of violence, looting and arson throughout the entire territory. The land descended into a state of almost total chaos as the terror spread. Entire towns were burnt to the ground and over 1,000 people were killed in a horrific wave of unrestrained violence. As UN electoral staff withdrew from the districts following the vote, they, and a large number of internally displaced persons, found themselves blockaded inside the UNAMET compound in the capital Dili, where they sought shelter from a series of ever more violent attacks by militia groups.
I recommended on the 8th of September that a total evacuation really was the only appropriate response to the deteriorating security. I stress again, that was my recommendation. In some contexts it got reported as a decision imposed from New York on the mission.
As the majority of UNAMET staff were evacuated, leaving behind a small UN team, over 250,000 Timorese were forced onto trucks by the militia and driven over the border to Indonesian West Timor. Any remaining civilians fled their homes to the hills in fear of their lives. After 11 long days, the Security Council authorised an international security force intervention to restore peace and security. The Interfet force, led by Australian General Peter Cosgrove, managed to eliminate all militia activity in a matter of weeks, with remarkably little loss of life. On 25th of October, the United Nations Security Council established the United Nations Transitional Administration in East Timor, UNAMET, as an integrated, multi-dimensional peacekeeping operation fully responsible for the administration of Timor-Leste during its transition to independence. UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan arrived in early 2000 to usher in the new era.
We are here as your partners. Our work is to be guided by your concerns and your hopes. Together, we can weather the current crisis and usher in a new era for East Timor. An era in which East Timor takes its place in the family of nations and in which its men, women and children can live lives of dignity and peace. My friends, Viva Timor Lorosai.
But the job was never going to be an easy one. The official UN Joint Assessment Report of January 2000 had delivered some grim statistics. After the popular consultation, 70 to 80% of all infrastructure had been destroyed by the militias or the Indonesian military. Thousands of Timorese were missing or killed, and almost a quarter of the population were living in camps across the border in West Timor. UNAMET's first priority was therefore humanitarian aid, as almost the entire population was in desperate need of assistance. As SRSG, Sergio Vieira de Mello, who had recently served as UN Special Envoy in Kosovo, oversaw all of the UN and donor activities, as well as becoming the country's chief administrator. UNAMET's broad mandate was unique in the history of peacekeeping missions, and the challenges were immense.
And I think that was a new role for UN. They were supposed to administer. It was not supposed to be just a peacekeeping mission. And to administer, you actually need administrators. You need public servants, bureaucrats, because they are the ones who knows how to do it.
But what was crucial was the political leadership provided by the UN. First and foremost by Kofi Annan in New York, and second by Sergio de Mello on the ground. And Sergio was able to gather around him the international agencies, UNDP, and all the various humanitarian or development agencies, together with the World Bank, IMF, ADB.
One of the major challenges was the repatriation of hundreds of thousands of refugees living in camps across the border in West Timor.
We've repatriated around 150,000 people from West Timor. Our main emphasis here is voluntary repatriation. This is something that we do along this road. People come from the Achabua area, sometimes as far as Kefar. They proceed through here along the road, are checked by PKF for weapons, things like that. Then they come to us, we register them down, give them a distribution depending on where they're going, and then IOM, of course, is left to take them to the final destination.
Many of the former militia leaders were angry at the repatriation of civilians who they had hoped to use and control within the camps. Still bitter at the result of the popular consultation, they attacked the UNHCR compound at Timor in September 2000, killing 3 staff members and 2 Indonesian security guards. The transitional administration also came under considerable scrutiny and was subject to ongoing criticism from several Timorese leaders frustrated at the pace of change.
What UNAMET has achieved in the last 7 months is almost next to nothing in terms of the establishment of democratic institutions, in terms of the establishment of a civil administration. At the district level, sub-district, at the various governmental departments, nothing is being done. Only in the next month or 2, I hope UNAMET will begin the recruitment of civil servants.
That impatience and that frustration is quite understandable. But I also tell them that they cannot expect a miracle to happen in a few months. The public opinion here, quite understandably, would have expected the UN, like a magician, to produce in East Timor what centuries of Portuguese colonialism and 24 years of Indonesian occupation did not produce. How do you expect, I asked them, the UN, the World Bank, the ADB, bilateral donors, in a matter of months to make things happen and rebuild this country from the ashes? It just doesn't happen that way.
Across the country, a massive program of reconstruction was carried out to repair and replace the infrastructure that had been destroyed the previous year. In Dili, the UNAMET administration began preparations for the election of an 88-member Constituent Assembly, tasked with writing a new constitution while establishing the framework for a transition to full independence.
Phase 1 was Security Council intervention, Phase 2 was the humanitarian, and then Phase 3 was the establishment of the United Nations administration and the beginning of the political process of transition.
Once elected, the Constituent Assembly was sworn in on the 20th of September. UNAMET and UNDP provided advisors and technical support to assist in the writing of the Constitution, and a program of national consultations was held to assist the Assembly in their task. All throughout this period, it was crucial to ensure participation and ownership by Timorese people and leadership of the institutions and systems being put in place.
The key issue is here how to do the things. Through consulting the leaderships and the people, trying to get the Timorese to the driver's seats, to be the owner, or to have the owner of the whole process.
It was vitally important that women were involved in this process of shaping the new nation's future.
And for the Constituent Assembly elections, UNIFEM worked with the Gender Affairs Unit to identify potential candidates, women candidates for the Constituent Assembly elections, and actually trained over 200 potential women candidates. It's important because as we're establishing the framework for nation building, it's very important that women also have an input into those decision-making fora.
The Constituent Assembly signed into force the territory's new constitution on 22nd of March 2002, and following presidential elections on 14th of April, Kai Rala Janana Gusmao, a former resistance leader, was appointed the first elected president. The newly independent country swore in its first government and held an inaugural session of Parliament on the morning of 20th of May 2002. That evening, more than 120,000 people celebrated the birth of the world's newest nation in a huge ceremony on the outskirts of the capital, Dili. With an official handover to power to the elected Timorese government complete, the UNAMET mission had fulfilled its mandate. It was succeeded by UNAMET. UNAMET, the United Nations mission of support in East Timor, was also a peacekeeping mission, but was mandated to provide assistance to the newly independent state until all operational responsibilities were fully devolved to the Timorese authorities, allowing the new nation, now called Timor-Leste, to attain self-sufficiency.
When UNAMET finishes its mandate, it didn't just finish it they didn't just go. They left behind a roadmap, okay? We had a national development plan, all Timorese owned up, done all by the Timorese, but with a strong support from UN at the time. And then as soon as we became independent, we built on it. We translated them into annual action plans.
Now that the primary institutions of state were installed, the UN and its agencies began working with the elected Timorese government to develop and implement national development strategies for the future.
The country was working on developing the National Development Plan. What we had to do as UN agencies was to work together to say what our contribution towards helping that plan become a reality would be. So we developed something that's called the UNDAF, the United Nations Development Assistance Framework. I mean, that's a basic kind of UN standard jargon, but what it means is it's saying what the UN can contribute to the national plan.
The Millennium Development Goals was very important for us, as a new nation, because when we were doing our national development plan, we did some vision work, okay? And the vision work was to actually set some goals for ourselves, because for 25 years we only had one aim in our life at that time, was to become independent, to be free. And that's all we knew.
Capacity development was also a key component in the mission's agenda.
There are a number of very important flagship programs that aim to build a national capacity for the long-term sustainable development. And these are critical in building institutions that will ensure the proper functioning of the government structure, provision of services, and social and economic development.
Addressing the legacy of 24 years of human rights violations and crimes was a major challenge facing Timor-Leste and the United Nations. UNAMET had established a serious crimes process supporting investigations and prosecutions, and from 2001, the United Nations missions and UNDP supported the National Truth, Reception and Reconciliation Commission to establish the truth and help heal the wounds of past conflicts. UNAMET's mission was mandated until May 2004, when it was planned that complete responsibility for law enforcement and security issues would be handed over to the relevant state institutions. The UN agencies would remain in place.
The UN agencies are the long-term partners. All over the world, that's the case. UNDP, supported by the agencies, are partners for a country, if you like, forever. But UNAMET and PKF missions, they're like cortisone. The body cannot be permanently on cortisone. You have to withdraw it. And you need other support systems which are more healthy, and the agencies will do that.
Each of the agencies has its own mandate. We have certain resources, we have certain expertise that we can provide. And what we need to do is see where our interventions can be strategic to help the country reach its goals.
Over the past 5 years, international donor funding had been a crucial factor in Timor-Leste's development, and billions of dollars had been pledged by the donor community.
One of the most important things is coordination. Coordination among UN agencies, but also coordination between UN agencies and the donors. And I'm talking about coordination of not only operational activities, but a coordination in the formulation of policy planning, ideas, and so forth.
In May 2004, UNAMET's mandate was extended for an additional 12 months to support the government in building its institutional capacity and ensure the smooth transition from peacekeeping to a sustainable development assistance framework.
We are under the second mandate of UNAMET. We hope that the same environment of understanding, of responsibility from both sides will guide the process in order to serve the state, the people.
The commencement of the ceremony to mark the assumption of responsibility for external security by the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste.
In a very short time, about the time it takes to get a doctoral degree in a university, a whole nation has been born from the debris of disorder and desperation. But it is not to be expected that beyond May next year, a special peacekeeping mission will continue.
And by May 2005, Timor-Leste seemed to have made the impossible dream come true, and within 5 years, the nation had gone from being a territory crippled by violence to a peaceful, democratic nation-state. With the withdrawal of the peacekeeping mission, a new political mission, the United Nations Office in Timor-Leste, UNITIL, was established in May 2005. Its role was largely advisory, to support the development of critical state institutions and provide training in the observance of democratic governance and human rights. But nation and peace building are never easy, and within months of the departure of the UN security forces, serious problems began to arise. In February 2006, over 500 soldiers of FFDTL, the National Defence Force, abandoned their posts, claiming that officers from the eastern parts of the country routinely discriminated against military personnel from the country's western districts. There were also serious institutional rivalries between the police and the military, which contributed to increasing societal tensions. Over the next few months, the security situation continued to worsen. Violent clashes between both military and police forces, and between serving members of the military and those who had abandoned their posts, rocked the capital Dili. East-west tensions spread throughout communities, often erupting violently and causing tens of thousands of civilians to flee their homes in fear of their lives. The majority of these grouped together for safety and camped in tent cities or in churches on the outskirts of the city.
Yeah, there are some groups of young people that every day are threatening us and giving fire to our houses, and also they are looting our things. That's why we are here.
By May 24th, the situation had deteriorated to the point that Foreign Minister Jose Ramos Horta sent out an official request for international assistance. The next day, an attack by soldiers on the police force resulted in the deaths of more than 10 people. The violence continued, and on June 26th, Prime Minister Mari Al-Khatiri announced his resignation. On July 8th, President Guzmão appointed Jose Ramos Horta Prime Minister. UNITIL's mandate had been scheduled to end in May 2006. However, the crisis led the Security Council to grant it a 3-month extension and ultimately, in August 2006, to establish a new mission named UNAMET, the United Nations Integrated Mission in Timor-Leste. As the new mission began its task, members of the International Stabilization Force sent to quell the violence were already securing the city. Today, Timor-Leste is once again stable. The tens of thousands of displaced people who fled their houses have gradually returned home. The United Nations and its agencies provided humanitarian assistance and supported the government in the conduct of extensive reintegration programs, which have allowed the returns to occur with remarkably few incidences of violence or retribution.
Hanoi até Loron Ohin, processo reintegração para deslocados sira, pacote no política na be hala hosi governo, mas be processo sira selo de apoio mais moços UN. Essa parte tuan hosi segurança, parte hosi processo sira de mobilização, parte balão hosi logística, parte hanesan tanto UNAMET, UN, liu hosi forças UNPOL, o FSI também ajuda no garante segurança mútua com o PNTL e nessa agência das Nações Unidas selo nessa IOM, UNDP, liu esse programa nesse diálogo, liu esse processo de avaliação, de monitorização, processo de acompanhamento, sabne hotu hamutu sai pacote ida ba hoisa ita tu garante estabilidade no paz e arrela.
Ita e eles são Sim.
Volta vai ter o futuro.
Both parliamentary and 2 rounds of presidential elections were held in 2007, with the United Nations and its agencies contributing both special assistance and technical support. Following the second round of polling, Nobel Peace Laureate José Ramos Horta was elected president after winning 69% of the vote.
After the crisis of 2006, the primordial objective before the United Nations was to restore the faith of the people in the institutions of democracy, and that is why, despite the difficult and challenging circumstances, the peaceful conduct of free and fair and broadly politically acceptable elections in 2007, both for the presidency and for the national parliament, were of critical significance in helping us assist the Timorese authorities improve the situation.
The last remaining rebel soldiers surrendered after their leader, Alfredo Reynado, was killed during attacks on the President and Prime Minister on the morning of 11th of February 2008. President Ramos Horta, who sustained life-threatening injuries during the attacks, was evacuated to Australia, where he underwent 2 months of medical treatment before returning to Dili on April 17.
Within 6 months of the successful elections of 2007, this country faced yet another challenge. The challenge was the armed attack on President Dr. José Ramos Horta, as also on Prime Minister Zanana Gusmao. And with the help and assistance of the United Nations, but essentially with their own conviction in peaceful resolution of the challenges, the country came together to respond to this crisis in a very mature manner without facing the type of the collapse which it had faced in 2006.
Hello everyone, I'm Jackie Chan.
entertain people, and I like to help people too. Saidama O, hello, Papas.
The mission's UNPOL members work in partnership with PNTL, the National Police Force, to ensure that law and order are enforced in an effective and responsible manner. And in the past 3 years, crime rates in the country have dropped to amongst the lowest in the region. UNPOL and PNTL also carry out community work to help encourage social cohesion and stability. These programs, carried out in conjunction with the national government, civil society organisations and UN agencies, work extensively with communities in problem areas where trouble has repeatedly occurred in the past. In addition, UNAMET assists the government in 4 priority mandated areas: democratic governance, the rule of law and human rights, security sector reform, and socio-economic development.
The main effort of the UNAMET mission, as also the UN country team in my tenure of last 3 years, has been to assist the capacity development, the development of the Timorese institutions, to assist in providing greater responsibilities and greater authority to the Timorese people themselves. This can occasionally give an impression that the United Nations does not appear to be as active as it should. But in my view, United Nations should not be taking the lead in any activity. The role of the United Nations is to encourage, motivate, and then facilitate the national authorities, the people of Timor-Leste, in conducting the activities which will be for the betterment of their society and their nation. And in this regard, I am quite happy to note that the people of Timor-Leste, the leaders of Timor-Leste, have every day over the last 3 years reinforced my faith in the Charter of the United Nations, in the words, better standards of life and the larger freedom, which the people of Timor-Leste constantly seek. The main success of the United Nations would not lie in the absence of crises in the future, but would rather lie in the ability of the Timorese society to deal with the future crises as a foci for further growth and development, as an opportunity for enhanced social cohesion, rather than, as happened in 2006, an element which creates societal regression and implosion from within. And in this regard, I remain confident that with the efforts of the Timorese people, supported by the international community, particularly the United Nations, the country will succeed.